Welcome to the Masters Alliance. I am Herb Perez, and this is Masters Alliance Podcast Uncut. Today, we're joined by an extraordinary individual who believes in the traditions of martial arts and studied with his father, and then went on to create some of the most unique programming in our industry, but for the right reasons. He started with verbal judo and then continued on to serve his community, training various individuals and community organizations, and now runs a nonprofit that serves over 10,000 children in his community and schools. His name is Master Chan Lee, and he is an amazing person who spends time with his passion, his family, and other professionals in the ASA professional organization. As we always say, strap in. This is going to be a great conversation with an extraordinary human being who is also an extraordinary businessman and martial artist. So let's get started. Welcome to the Masters Alliance Podcast Uncut. And today I'm joined by a great friend of mine for many years, and I've watched him and the amazing things that he's been doing in the martial arts. But we're going to talk a little bit about that during this podcast. I want to welcome Master Chan Lee.
Hello, sir. Thank you. It's an honor to be on here.
Master Lee, it's great to have you here. I want to get started because we've got a lot to cover today, but could you tell us a little bit about what it was like to start training in Taekwondo at such a young age, and did you always want to dedicate your life to martial arts?
Well, I started, like a typical master's son. My father's a grandmaster in Taekwondo. Chang Mo Kwan came to the United States in 1975. Taught at the YMCA for a year, and opened his first school in central part of Milwaukee, right in the hood, and that's where I got started. And I just basically, it's something you did. You knew no different. And plus, being an immigrant child, I would go to school. The bus actually dropped me off right in front of the dojang, so I stayed at the dojang all day. My mom worked at a chocolate factory, so she was actually the real breadwinner in the first parts of our existence in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And everything I did was just Taekwondo every day in the classroom. And at that time, it was in the 70s. It was the Bruce Lee craze, so it was the Bruce Lee Kung Fu craze. And so my father really built a Taekwondo school based on just free sparring, right? So we did a lot of fighting, went to open Taekwondo tournament or karate tournaments at that time. And he said at that time, it was the only thing he could do to build up the brand of Taekwondo was you had to beat people at tournaments and whatever. So his first crop of fighters were just really, really good. And so, they won a lot of tournaments. They found out, who my dad was. He got a little bit of a calling here in Milwaukee. But then to my father's surprised, a lot of the people that were learning martial arts, they were starting kind of some trouble in the neighborhoods. They were fighting. He'd get complaints like these students of his were like beating people up in the neighborhood and whatever. And he realized that, character education was also super important in learning martial arts. So one of the things he did was he said that, kindness is an important part of martial arts. Like kindness is the ultimate self-defense. And I also coined that from Tom Callos, who's a good friend of mine. And he made his students clean the park and volunteer at their church. And he said that if you want to be a great student of martial arts, you have to be a good citizen. And if everybody was kind to each other, guess what? Then we wouldn't have to have police or learn self-defense. So we have to be role models of kindness. So that's where my martial art journey began. I graduated from a private high school, all boys Catholic, right? My father really believed in education. He said that if you want to do anything great in the United States of America, you gotta be educated. So I ended up going to this great private school, went to University of Wisconsin, and I went there for a degree in journalism and actually a degree in marketing and also in communications. And going into college, sir, I was like, I'm never doing Taekwondo. I said, I'll help my dad at the school, but I'm not going to come back and do this as a career. And, a funny thing happens, right? You realize it's a part of your identity. So I joined the Taekwondo club that was at the University of Wisconsin. Next thing you know, I'm running it. Next thing I know, I had 70 students, and I'm like, man, I'm pretty good at this, right? I mean, I had all this experience, and sophomore year, I'm like, you know what? I think I want to do this as a career. So I did everything and anything possible to get out of college as quick as I can. And on the weekends, I would help my dad at the school. And I think one of my advantages is that I got a Western education, but then I went headfirst into helping my father run his Taekwondo school.
Well, you talked a little bit about how your father, Grandmaster Lee, influenced your path as a martial artist and instructor, but you did mention that you have a degree in communications. How has that education complemented your work in the martial arts world?
You know, in the beginning, not much, because running a business and getting a college education, right off the bat didn't really, help. But then over the time, you kind of realize some of the mass media concepts, right? Sound bites, right? How to craft a carefully worded message. I did all my father's advertisings. That stuff began to help. But, usually when you learn advertising and communications, it's for like big companies like Miller or, GM and so forth. And you have to kind of craft your message with that. But I'll tell you what, right after college, I got into this whole Tony Robbins world, and the Tony Robbins of, learning how to like be a better person, learn how to like be a better business person. I learned some marketing concepts from Dan Kennedy and all these other big names that I was like, holy cow, I've got to learn some of this stuff on how to like be a better marketer, a better salesperson. I went to like insurance sales training just to even like, because I had no background in sales, right? So I said, let me learn from the insurance industry. I learned, so I have a resource library in my office, and I told my wife, I said, that's the $100,000 library. I said, this is the number of seminars I took over the years just to educate myself to help my father run his schools well. So I credit to my dad too. I mean, one of the things is my father is a constant learner, and the thirst to kind of keep learning new things and do stuff, even martial arts. Like I was doing judo, gumdo, I did hapkido. A lot of my father's grandmaster friends would come up and I would take private lessons with them. So, we did 70% of Taekwondo, 30% of our curriculum, especially some of the self-defense parts in the beginning was hapkido based. And it was, some of that type of stuff that we started off with. But over the years, I've kept that up. I've learned other things like, defensive tactics for police training, because I noticed we were working with law enforcement. So I trained with some law enforcement people. I also learned something called verbal judo. One of my mentors did training with the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office, and he invited me to this training, and I got to learn under the famous Dr. George Thompson, who trained all the police, especially in LA after the Rodney King riots, on how to use words to de-escalate conflict. And I realized that wasn't a part of our curriculum. And so I got a chance to retrain that into de-escalation contents for our students to learn anti-bullying education and stuff like that. So.
And I remember that was my first meeting with you was during the verbal judo days. But I want to move into the part where what led you to take on the business side of the school? And was this a natural transition, or were there unique challenges that you faced?
I think when you go to college, the biggest experience, I think, for college is to not just get an education. That's what everybody thinks it is. I think it's really a way for you to discover who you are, because you're away from your parents for the first time. You start seeing who your friends are and what careers they're getting into. And, Grandmaster Perez, I changed my major 7 times, in typical Asian fashion, right? You got to be a doctor. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Dad. So I took all these pre-med classes. I hated it. Okay. You become lawyer. So I took like all these, political science classes, and it didn't hit me. And, a good friend of mine was, he was my college roommate, and he's like, why don't you do something you like? Just start there. I said, okay. So I started taking some English classes, and I was like, all right, I can't be an English teacher. I don't know if I see that as my calling. And, I went through 7 different majors before I figured out that I was going to do communications and journalism. Right. And so it was about that. And that's when I discovered I was good at Taekwondo, and, nowhere near your level, but in my own world, I was, I did okay in the Midwest, but I also thought my gift was being able to teach. I was able to teach people concepts, empower them through martial arts, made you feel good. And the weird thing was the level of respect you got just becoming a Taekwondo teacher. So I had college professors that were teachers of mine, and they would invite me to their houses for dinner. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of neat. They're only talking to me because I know Taekwondo. And it opened so many cool doors for me as an undergrad. But doing that transition and then helping my father with the business. My father's a traditionalist. Like, we only wore white uniforms. So when I said, hey, let's wear colored uniforms for our junior staff that help out and our leaders. Oh, sir, I fought him for 2 years. Like 2 years, he wouldn't let me bring any color uniform. And then, one day he said, okay, just these 4 kids. And then everybody talked about these 4 kids wearing a red uniform for helping out. And I said, Dad, look at how great it is for the retention. And he's like, okay, all right, do more. And so, little things like that were like huge for him to open his mind. I gave my father a lot of credit. We butted a lot of heads, but we learned a lot in the process. And then he knew that if we can touch more lives doing Taekwondo, then it's good for the business, and also it's good for the community. And I think that's it was hard. It was definitely hard. But we found a happy medium that he allowed me to do things. And when he was teaching this school, it was primarily adults. There was a lot more adults in class than kids. So he just gave me kind of free reign on what to do with the kids program. And, we started like cutting the forms in half for some of we still do ITF forms, the old ITF forms that are a little longer and harder to learn. And I said, Dad, these 7-year-olds are having a hard time learning the whole form. Let's just do half. And so things like that, he gave in a little bit, but it was hard for him. But yeah, we butted a lot of heads, and, we grew in the process. And at that time, there was no trade organization, right? There was no NATMA or Maya or ASA or, any of these AMS. I think AMS may have just started. And I just remember not like, where am I going to get all this information? And so literally, this is before 9/11, right? You could just get on an airplane really easily and go somewhere. I went to New York, visited some really big schools there. Tiger Showman's karate at the time was really big. I visited him. I visited some big schools in the West Coast. That's where I met Master Farabors, who was really, really open, was showing me his dojang. And by the way, I bought all his Hapkido tapes too. So, it was one of those things where I got a chance to meet the people, this is pre-internet, right? The only way you could meet people is you had to go out and just meet them, and did that. So that's how I kind of got started in growing our schools and learning the business part. But it was hard, sir. It was definitely hard.
Yeah, no doubt. Listen, what were some of your core philosophies when it comes to teaching Taekwondo, and what life lessons do you hope your students will take away from Taekwondo besides the physical skills?
My philosophy in learning Taekwondo, and it's also my life philosophy, is that it's a way for self-discovery. By learning martial arts, you discover who you are as a person, right? And you learn what scares you, what frustrates you, things that you can overcome, and making sure that, you get that deep life lesson. And I think when we start martial arts, and to me, I was one of those teachers that was very hard on beginners. He was like, oh, you know what, deeper stance, you got to punch harder. But I can't hear you scream. You got to be louder. And when you do that, these people, and I realized that they're not students yet. These people are customers. So I look at our first 3 belt ranks. I said, I tell our staff this all the time. I said, they're not students, they're customers. And they have to learn the basics, and don't get so enamored on perfect technique in the beginning. Then over time, you turn them into students where they, say, hey, we have training at midnight. Yes, sir, I'm there. Hey, we have training at 6 a.m. Yes, sir, I'm there. Right. But you do that to a new beginner, there's no way that they're going to do that. We've all had this, right? So someone at a black belt test breaks a toe, and you see them hobbling, and then they tape it up and they finish up the test, and they're like, yes, sir, I'm fine. Or they turn an ankle. Your beginners won't do that. They're like, oh, I'm done for the day. They're leaving. So just making sure that you understand that they have to buy into the philosophy of martial arts about pushing themselves to the limits, being the best versions of themselves, trying their hardest. And then over time, they'll understand this is the detail of this technique. This is what you need to do. So that's kind of been our philosophy over time. But, back in the day, right, it was like, we used to beat up all the white belts, right? All my dancers, black belts, be like, all right, all the white belts line up. And then you had 10 new people, and if 2 people stayed, you're like, you're worthy to stick around, right? That mentality has definitely gone by the main wayside. And more and more, I don't know if you've seen this, sir, the way that so many martial arts schools are flooded with kids with so many issues, from ADHD to hyperactivity to attention deficit to, Asperger's to autism. And we have so many kids that have so many issues. And especially coming out of COVID, we're having more kids with issues of just spatial awareness and, I call it good nunchi, just, being able to say, hey, listen, I'm kicking the target too hard. I should ease up, and just teaching them these social cues. I feel like that's kind of like the kicking and punching is there, but it's a tool to help them learn these life skills. And I'm very proud to say over the last 30 plus years that I've been teaching Taekwondo, we've produced 22 kids that have become valedictorian of their high school. And that to me is like a really cool feather in our cap. This year's class of black belts that have graduated high school, we have a kid going to Northwestern. We have a kid going to Yale. One of my black belts is going to Yale. Last year, I had a kid go to Princeton. So, we produced some pretty high-level kids that are, another kid went to Brown. So these parents now get it. If they understand that it's a great way for them to develop, the soft skills of life. It's a great way for them to kind of, enroll their kids. So back in the day, it used to be like, what can you do to get my kid into the Olympics? Or what can you do to get my kids to be a top fighter? And now it's about, okay, what can you do to make my kid the best version of who they can be?
And you've answered the question that I was going to ask next. So I'm going to move on to another question. And it's just amazing work that you're doing there. And that's about validating the process. But more importantly, it's a measurement that we use in our school as well, where our kids end up in school and as a result of their Taekwondo experience. There was a MTV made episode that focused on your mission for improving students' lives. Can you elaborate on what the mission is and what it means to you and how you implement it?
Yeah. Sir, it was that whole thing happened by accident in a weird way, right? MTV had a casting call for a TV show called Made. And it was like, I want to be made into a power lifter. I want to be made into a ballet dancer. Well, they wanted a kid to be made into a karate kid. All right. And they interviewed like 60 people throughout the Midwest to be this kid's maid coach. And at that time, I just had our second child. So we had, a kid that was, a year and a half and a newborn at home. And I asked my wife, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And she's like, just go ahead and try it. So I went out, they did a casting call. I sent like 3 of my instructors. I did, and they all, did a little, a kind of an interview and showing their teaching style. And I went and I did my teaching style. And then the next thing I know, I get a call back from New York and they said, hey, we'd love for you to be this MTV maid coach. So I actually lived in Kimberly, Wisconsin, which is near Green Bay. It was an hour and a half from where I lived. So I lived up there for most of the week and trained this kid. And I basically wanted to show them like, martial arts, you have to kind of go beyond your comfort zone. So we woke this kid up at like 6 a.m. We ran, we trained him and then sent him to school. And then I met him at school and brought him back out and, taught him some sparring concepts and things like that. And, this is the MTV's idea. It wasn't mine. They said, well, what if we brought ninjas? I'm like, I don't do anything with ninjas. And they're like, all right, well, but it would be cool. So I gave in and we had some scenes where the ninjas, attacked the kid in school and he had to do some self-defense moves. And, the executives at the MTV completely loved it, and it ended up being the 100th episode of Made, and it was a very popular show. But one thing I loved about it was this was a computer gaming kid that was not in the best of shape, and it was great to kind of teach him Taekwondo. He lost like 30 pounds, right? He pushed himself. This was one of the hardest things he's ever done in his life, and he made some big changes in his life and was kind to his mother near the end and so forth. Parents thanked us. And I know I was very proud because it was a chance to show us the other parts of what martial arts can do for people.
And I think that's an amazing story. And it'd be interesting to know where he is now. But I'm going to go search down that episode, and I actually sounds like he'd be a great president of the United States. But you've been featured in major media outlets, and you've consulted and continue to consult for schools nationwide. How do you see your role in shaping the future of martial art instruction in the U.S.?
Sir, I think, I lead through the example you've also set out, and I just want to give a shout out to you, sir. I saw you at a Kuki-1 test. I know you don't like to hear stuff like that, but you're an accomplished athlete in Taekwondo. You're one of my heroes growing up. Seeing you get a gold medal in Taekwondo, you put Taekwondo on the map. You did TV shows and all this stuff, and you always had a certain level of grace and a certain level of like, this is how I want things done, and you've given back to our community. And I feel like that's also part of my role is, I wouldn't be who I am. I wasn't like self-made. It was one of these things where a lot of my seniors have influenced me and giving back, and they've taken me under their wing. I remember I had pretty successful schools in the 90s and 2000s and so forth. And here I am volunteering at the Taekwondo Nationals, right? And I'm everybody's errand boy, bringing water, yes sir, doing this, and I'm like, man, I'll probably make 3 times the amount you do. But the fact that they gave back to Taekwondo to make nationals and all those things, because they really love Taekwondo and they want to help grow Taekwondo. And I feel like that's part of my role is to, help grow Taekwondo to new levels. And, if you looked at nationals in the 90s and 2000s, mainly in the 80s and 90s, it was like the most popular martial art to do. And we've kind of lost that luster with like MMA coming in, kickboxing, yoga, even that yoga space with, calm mind and body, that kind of got taken. So I feel like all that has been taken away, and that, our job is to, help parents and people understand that if you put your kid through Taekwondo and they start at white belt and they complete it to black belt, and in that journey, there'll be a giant transformation of your child. I 100% guarantee your child will be a better person, and you'll be a better person, going through it. And if we can give them a slice of that, we can make our country stronger, and we can make our kids stronger. Especially, people are calling this generation of kids snowflakes. I think if they all made Taekwondo a part of the character education of helping these kids become better versions of themselves, I think we can be stronger. And so one of the other things that I've done is, I haven't done with our black belts help, is we started a nonprofit Taekwondo program in the inner city of Milwaukee. And, we've taught over 10,000 kids there, teaching them free Taekwondo. And we're putting our money where our mouth is. I really feel like, if these kids get a shot to like be better themselves through Taekwondo, we can make our city strong. All our cities have issues. And I feel like if we can start with the kids there, right, we can do that. So really, I feel like I have to help promote the positivity of what Taekwondo can do if kids get through it. And families get through it. I think that to me is what I feel like my role is in, all the things I'm a part of in terms of helping the next generation of Taekwondo instructors get to that level. Because there's certain, you have the Taekwondo master that wants to just produce fighters and get medals and do all that. That's one aspect, but they're missing some elements there, right? And then you have the other Taekwondo master that goes, well, this is a great business. Holy cow. And they don't do anything to improve themselves, and they do nothing to promote their own education and becoming the master instructors that their students look up to, and I want to inspire them to say, hey, you got to level up, and also at the same time, just, making sure everybody is, of a healthy mindset. I think our country right now is going through so many issues. And I think if people just got a better idea of learning martial art, like I'm sure, Grandmaster Perez, when you got into the ring, you wanted to tear the other person's head off, but afterwards you were done. You were great friends. It was like, there was a level of respect and understanding. And just like 2 minutes ago, you were like, trying to kill each other. Where is that type of grace and humility in our country? And I think, Taekwondo in a weird way kind of teaches that to our people.
I think those were great words, and it really speaks to the holistic approach of a modern day master. And I know we'll be having more conversations about that. And I actually have a section of that I'd like to speak to you about. I want to transition now, though, to, I know you've trained staff at the Miller Brewing Company, which is one of your community businesses and recognized worldwide. You also helped airline professionals after 9/11. What insights did you gain from working with those unique groups?
I think one of the biggest things is that when working with Miller, they were looking for a way to keep their employees healthy and keeping their employees kind of motivated. And, and it was kind of wild. At the time we were teaching them, they were owned by Philip Morris. So there were like people smoking in the middle of the of the hallways. You're like, holy cow, right? Because it was it was a tobacco company. But the executives there really saw it just really cleared their mind. And I think in working with them, it was not just about the martial arts. It was like, wow, I felt so much stress relief. I didn't think about my work. I didn't think about anything else. I feel good about myself. I can go attack my day after teaching classes there. With the airlines, that was one of those, right after 9/11, all the flights were suspended. And one of my airline moms came up to me, and she was a flight attendant, and she goes, hey, I got to fly in 3 days, but there's been nothing. We don't know what, another terrorist attack can happen. Can you teach me? And I said, yeah, I'd be happy to teach you some close quarter stuff, elbows, knees, how to use a coffee can to like hit someone, just basic stuff that you have some stuff to do. And then she calls me back and she goes, sir, I have 50 other flight attendants that are colleagues of mine. Can I come? And I said, sure, not a problem. So no, free of charge. We didn't charge them at all. It was like the right thing to do. United we stand, make our country strong. And I taught like these ladies some basic self-defense techniques. And we just did it for 2 classes. And then the following day she was flying, and, all the cameras were there. And, Mary Alwyn was her name, and the camera was right in her face. And they asked her, she goes, are you afraid of flying today? She goes, no, I took Taekwondo lessons at J.K. Lee's. And next thing I know, I had CNN there. I had NBC Today Show. I had, all the major networks locally, USA Today. I mean, I just blew up, and it was like I said, purely by accident, because it was the right thing to do right at that time. And then at that time, that's where I met some of my mentors, because I could teach you how to knock someone out, but I didn't know how to handcuff you. And so I started working with the top level law enforcement guys. There's a guy named Gary Klugwitz. I don't know if that rings a bell, but Gary created the Red Man suit. And Gary lives in West Allis, Wisconsin. And so I said, Gary, can you teach me how to do handcuffing? He goes, I won't teach you, but I'll teach it with you. And I said, sure, let's do this. So we created an airline program that helped flight attendants take people down, and then how to cuff them down and so forth. And we were using something called rip restraints. And rip restraints are what they use in prisons, where they use Velcro to tie people down. So we said, they're not heavy. They're very easy to use. We'll teach flight attendants how to use rip restraints to put people down on the airlines. And that's what our RFP, our request for proposals, went out to all the airlines. So I was on a vendor list. I was one of the top 30 authorized vendors to work with the airlines. And then next thing you know, that Richard Reed guy happened, where he tried to light his shoe on fire. And then all the passengers came in, and then they hit him, and then they took their belts and they tied him down. So everything we predicted in the proposal happened. And so the next thing I know, I'm doing presentations in front of United Airlines, right? Midwest Express Airlines, which was here in Milwaukee, and so forth. So we almost landed United Airlines, and then they went bankrupt. And that's when all the economy went south and so forth. So those are some of the insights. I think the main thing about the airline thing is that just do the right thing, right? I mean, your superpower is this martial arts that you have mastered. And when people need it, give it to them, and give them some enlightenment, and help people in need. And like I said, it wasn't like a business venture. It was just one of those things we thought it was the right thing to do at that time.
Well, you have a service mentality, and I think we need more instructors who serve as role models, and then add service into their community as part of their success matrix. And it kind of leads me into my next question, which I know you're passionate about. How do you feel Taekwondo can help individuals cope with the challenges of modern life?
I asked a child psychologist once, and I said, how does Taekwondo help these kids become better, or how does it help human beings in general, right? And this, child psychologist came up to me and said, well, your dojang mat where you train is like a laboratory. So if you have a kid that's shy or a kid that is scared or is not very confident, then they're probably the same kid outside of the four walls of the dojang. So you have an opportunity to help give them mechanisms to become more confident on the dojang floor, kiaping loud, doing things that they didn't think they could do, overcoming their fears. And that gives them these things in their brain that they're able to, move forward to. And then, it's the same thing, if if you have a kid that's unfocused, like has ADHD, jumping around, but, they want to get that next belt, and they better stand straight and they better listen to the directions, or learn, 20 moves of an intricate pumse. Well, guess what? You're teaching them how to focus, and you're giving them tools in their brain that they can go through. And so later on, when they are in school, they understand that, oh, my brain's been there before. And so, like I said, I look at my dojang as an opportunity to work with people, once again, to enhance themselves. It's a laboratory of self-improvement, right? And our tool that we're using is what? It happens to be kicking and punching. It's our Taekwondo teachings.
Yeah, and that's something that I think about, and I often say, and I really appreciate that, that what they call bias affirmation, right? Affirmational bias affirmation, because that's what we do. And the reality is that our medium is Taekwondo. And it leads me into my next question, because not only do you give back in your community, that started with a long legacy from your dad, who I also know and respect and have run into many times throughout the years. And I've watched your career evolve from verbal judo to the various things in service in the community and service for Taekwondo on a national level. But now you're involved with the ASA, the American Sabanim Association. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in it, and then what inspired you to become a member or a leader in it?
Well, I live in the great state of Wisconsin. My wife hates it. She thinks I'm a Wisconsin homer. I'm a small town martial art hick, even though Milwaukee has 1.5 million people. But one of the things they did is something called the milk board, right? Because not enough kids were drinking milk, and there was a dairy thing. And I was like, wow, that's really brilliant, that they're trying to espouse the benefits of milk. Right. And you remember the milk mustache ads in the magazines and whatever. And I said, Taekwondo needs something like that. Right. And so I called it. So we created this group called the American Sabanim Association. And you notice the word Sabanim. And people go, why do you use Sabanim? And I joke with everybody, I'm sick of being called sensei. Right. One Karate Kid movie called Everybody Sensei. Right. You could be in Kung Fu and you're not a Shifu, you're a sensei. Right. And so I wanted to propagate the fact that, all these Taekwondo Sabanim, we have to all get together, and we should educate ourselves in becoming better versions of ourselves, just like we're asking our students. And so we learn better business practices. We learn better ways to run our teaching floor. We run better ways to, make our community stronger. And you've got some big thinkers because, like I said, I'm just the leader of the group. There are people far more successful than I am in this group, and they're willing to share. And then there's other things too, like at some point I'm going to be too old to teach, or I'm going to exit out of this industry. What's the graceful way we can exit and propagate our brand and our people and our juniors, and helping them, and developing partnerships with our next level of leaders, because that's another part of our industry that's kind of terrible, right? Because everybody goes off and does their own thing. Why isn't there one unified group of how we're doing things? There's not anything that unifies Taekwondo, right? And even there's ATA, which is a great group, right? In fact, you can make an argument they're very strong in how they've organized themselves. And then there's ITF, right, which is only in certain parts of the United States. And then you have, USAT, which has its issues, AAU. And so you're like, okay, this is a non-political group. It was like, what can we do to be better Taekwondo instructors? And then also increase the standards of what our industry should be about, right? Like I advocate that every Taekwondo school should have defibrillators, right? That should just be a basic thing, right? Invest in them, put them in your dojang. We've had a couple incidents in our own dojang. So just, being smart about that, safety protocols, How many times have, I don't know, like someone broken a finger and one of your unqualified instructors just pulled on it, just stuff like that. You're just like, all right, we've got to like make sure we, kind of qualify things. Even cleaning products, right? Like not COVID right now, but before that it was hepatitis, right? HIV, the stuff that's on your mat. I mean, what are you doing to clean your mats to make it sanitary? I have friends that own jiu-jitsu schools, and you're talking about staph infections left and right that happen on jiu-jitsu floors. So like I said, it's everything and anything about making our industry stronger, making Taekwondo Sabonims have a better education about like making their dojangs the best it can be.
And you, while you were talking, you may have seen me glance down because the milk mustache commercial inspired me because I have something I'm doing. So I'll send you one of the T-shirts I make using that idea for my school, changing it from got milk to got kicks. And so now even you have inspired me in another way, which is great. I think, one of the things I want to understand, and I think I've heard a little bit about, how do you think that the ASA has benefited you in your personal development?
It made me more mindful on how I treat my staff. It made me more mindful in helping them become, better versions of me, and inspiring them to be longer. I'm blessed, and we've had staff that has been with us for 15 to 20 years. And I think that's cool. I also look at someone like Grandmaster Chung in Buffalo and Master Mertens, and I see these relationships, and there's people like that show up. And so personally, for me, it's a relationship business. Life is about relationships. It's not just business. It's just life's about relationships and the relationships that you keep. And so to me, that's what it's about. It's about connecting with my staff, connecting with my junior staff, inspiring my students to be better, and looking at it from that. And I think if you come from that standpoint, then I think the money's always going to be there, right? Then all that other stuff about running programs and whatever, everybody's always looking for tactics, right? What's the latest way I can extract the most money out of my students, right? But I think it goes beyond that. It's more important about developing the right relationships with your people long term. I have some of my father's original black belts, 35 years plus still training with us, and a strong relationship with my father, with myself, with my current staff. And, that teaches me something. And which is also very neat too, is that a lot of my father's top black belts are also really important people in the business community locally. They're doing really well in life, and they're still a part of what we're doing, which also is helping us fund our nonprofits too. So we've got just, when you put cool people together, cool things tend to happen. And I think that's kind of what ASA is about, when you bring everybody together. But also that's what I realize I can do that locally with my own community, is bring cool people together to do cool things through the martial arts.
Well, you just reminded me, and I'm going to need to send you this because a lot of what you're saying resonates with us. Because when I came to Chicago, where we met and had some coffee and a great conversation together, I was inspired by the amount of people that came together who loved Taekwondo to do the Kuki-Wan training, and then to ultimately, a lot of them test for different programs, whether it was a POOM, Dan examiner, or an instructor certification, master instructor certification. So this is a question that I've been thinking about for a long time, or what is a modern day master and what should they be teaching? So the majority of the professional business associations help instructors get as many students as humanly possible. We're going to help you get all these students. Unfortunately, they don't tell you what to do with them once you get them. So these guys are getting people running through their doors. And I don't want to mention the name, but I met one of these individuals that runs an organization, and he says, I have all these students coming through my doors, and you should join my thing because I have all these students. I said, well, can I ask you a question? I said, what's your biggest problem? And he says, retention. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, after 8 months, I go, 8 months? He loses his students after 8 months. And this is a gentleman who has 10 schools. And so I did two things after that. One, I didn't join his organization for advice because it wasn't resonating with me on what he was doing and how he was doing what he was doing. He was making and does make a lot of money. but he wasn't serving his community or the students, because retention means the students are staying and learning, and more importantly, they value what you do. And then the second thing we did was we really thought about that as an add-on. And so I want to, with your permission, send you a thing that we've been working on called the Modern Day Masters course kind of thing and get your thoughts on it, because I think it will resonate with you. But again, this isn't talking about me or some of the things that I'm passionate about. I want you to think about for a second, and if you could share with us an example of how the ASA members themselves have collaborated with each other, cooperated, and how they've helped each other and grow their business or understanding of their communities.
So one of the things I advocate when you're at ASA is that you connect with people that, you know, are on your level and some people that are above your level, right? And, you know, as you know, in Taekwondo training, if you train with people that are better than you just naturally are going to get better, right? And then you also have your peers that also kind of are your cheerleaders and so forth. So it's like a peer-to-peer and peer-to-mentor type of, you know, mentorship. And people call themselves, you know, I was doing some of these calls, but now some people randomly call me and I'll give them things to do and so forth. But I really think it's important that, you know, people connect with one another and help each other out. And because when I first got into this business, there was no group. It was some of my seniors that I would call them and they would help me and vice versa, or they would come to my promotion test, or I would help them out with their tournaments and we would get together and help each other out. So, you know, there's no like, and there's another thing, there's no one way to run a Taekwondo school, right? There's many different ways. As we were talking before, someone that's running a school Monday through Thursday, right? It's just being able to just say what's right for you. I mapped out what I wanted as a Taekwondo school in my 20s, and it was terrible because it was from a single person's perspective and all I did was work. I put in 12-hour days, sometimes 16 hours, no questions, because I wanted to be successful and that's what I wanted. And it grinded on my staff, you know, and to me, I was like, if you're not doing this, you're not meant to be in this business. That was the way. And now once I had kids and I matured a little bit as a human being, and I was like, no, we got to be equally balanced. You got to spend time with your family. All my staff only work 5 days a week, you know, and I don't want them putting more than 45 to 50 hours in a week. You know what I mean? And I want them, I give them 2 days off in a row. And these weren't ideas from me. It was just from learning from other people and just, you know, learning from that and finding what ways that someone's doing success fits your model. You know what I mean? I know a very small school owner in a small town who, you know, doesn't do big numbers, but he's a multimillionaire because he's invested well and he only works his dojang 4 days out of the week. And it fits right for him. You know what I mean? And if any other person could put their version of what success is, the man has put his son through a high level college. He's been at his graduations. He's able to be around for his kids and so forth, you know. And I look at that person, I said, that's his definition of what success is. And I think you got to find that. You got to find that what you want. You know what I mean? And I think that's important. And I think some people are just enamored in like, I got to make as much money as I can. Some people, it's like, okay, I want a life work balance. You got to find that medium with yourself. But, you know, personally, I think it's, you know, having children, you know, being my biggest gift to humanity to me is my children, right? I hope they do good things on the planet and I hope they do good things in their community. They understand what I want from them. And I spend as much time as possible. Like even today, I took off today. I'm going to be watching my daughter's lacrosse game and I don't miss those for the world, you know, and I do the same for my staff too, you know, and I think I don't want them to not be somewhere for their kids. And then there's resentment for the dojang. So you're saying that those are the things I hope people learn and they find their version of success when they get there. And the variety of people that are at the organization is incredible, from like people that have 10, 15 locations and they own like 80 of the buildings that they're in, to the guy that is struggling with 100 students and he's just looking to make it and he's struggling with rent. We have that guy there too. And they immediately, I can't tell you the number of times people have come back, and I call it the phenomena. Like a year later, they come back and you're like, what happened? I paid off my house. Thank you, sir. I'm like, oh, that's great. You know? that, they did the work, but they took that advice and took massive action on it. And I think that's the most important part of ASA, is getting inspiration for yourself and then taking action in the advice that you're getting.
Well, along that line, what are some of the biggest challenges that martial arts school owners are facing today? And what advice is ASA giving them to address those challenges?
I think the two biggest challenges, in my opinion, is the rising cost of labor, right? I think finding instructors and then compensating them without also developing that next core group and having them, develop. I think that's a really big challenge, with that. And then being able to, find that sweet spot where, with inflation right now, how much can you raise your rates that's going to reflect it without, middle class, obviously upper middle class, no problem. But if you're in a middle class to lower middle class, I have a couple dojans in there. How is that affecting your business, and how are you going to adjust your pricing, to help these families as you're navigating through these times and so forth. And, Grandmaster Perez, you and I have been through this several times, right? The '08 crash, right? The .com crisis, right? My father in 1987 went through the big crash there, the early '80s. And, so we've been through it. And it comes back down to is value. What type of value are you giving your families? What type of value are you giving them where they go, I'm not going to cut this out of my budget, right? And I think that's incredibly important. And then at the same time, instructors, I have, I don't want to say free labor, but I do have a lot of volunteer instructors that have the same philosophies that we do. Like one of my assistant instructors is a 7th Dan Kukiwan, right? He's a college professor. He teaches 2 classes for me. The man is entertaining. The man is great. The man has great knowledge. He doesn't do it for the money. He's just doing it to give back to our community, right? So, anyway, those are some of the challenges I believe that are going on. And, I think we found some fixes with that, with finding some volunteer staff and also a philosophy of the right people that are a part of your organization.
And what advice would you give to other martial art professionals who are considering joining the ASA?
If you look at the business as a whole, it's a pretty simple business, right? It's get members, keep members. That's it, right? And, making sure that you have the right tools to get members, right? From a great website, to great internet marketing, to great internal promotions, to have your students bring their friends to get referrals to into your dojan. And then 2, how good is your curriculum? How good is your curriculum that engages people to want to keep training? And how well do you educate parents to say, oh, it's not just, this kills me, right? Oh, sir, we're going to take a break because we're going to join soccer or baseball or whatever. To the point where you go, sir, we're never going to stop. We're going to come maybe just once a week, but Taekwondo is way too important. So what is your curriculum saying? Is it just great kicking and punching, or does it move beyond the kicking and punching? Do the people see those benefits? And once again, value. And so that's my advice is, if you're doing that, it's a simple business, but there are some formulas behind that you have to do. Get members and keep members, right? And what can you do to keep someone that's with you for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, a decade, right? Through high school, right? As a young adult, you know what I mean? I think those are things that you've constantly, your role as the headmaster is to make sure that you're constantly giving them journeys, giving them hurdles to go over and things that they can reach for. Because if they feel like they're not learning and moving and doing something, then they're going to quit. They're going to move on to something else. They'll move on to the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? How many times has that happened? Or, sir, I want to join an MMA gym. You know what I mean? So just being able to, do that. I do say though, sir, the 2 absolutes, if you just look at our business from an outside, fitness is always going to be number 1. I think people always want to get in shape, right? Look at the fitness industry. So are your classes giving a good workout? And then number 2, self-defense. Does your curriculum address realistic self-defense where they feel like that's valuable, like swimming, right? It's a valuable thing. I got to keep knowing that, right? There's a third thing which is super important, and it's mainly for kids, is the character development. Are they cleaning their rooms? Are they working hard at school? Are they paying attention to their teachers? Are they listening to their parents? Those are the three main keys, I think, is universal if you're going to be running a school.
And I have one final question, and then I'm going to wrap up because I don't want to take up your entire day. But actually, maybe two things. But this one would be kind of a little ephemeral or a little salesmanshipy. But what advice would you give to someone considering to start their own martial art journey, either as a student or as an instructor?
For anybody that wants to be a student, I think it's important that you do things that you feel like that's good for you, right? That brings you joy, that keeps you in shape, and keeps you connected to a community. I think there's nothing better than Taekwondo. I think the community of people that go to Taekwondo, it's amazing when I have black belts go off to college and they join the Taekwondo program. Their best friends are still a part of it. Even they all went to different dojans. Their friends are still in that Taekwondo club, right? And it's just a community of great people. So anybody that wants to do something productive and make themselves and enhance themselves to be better, especially for kids, Taekwondo is nothing better. And I think it's built into Taekwondo for kids, parents that are enrolling their kids to build character and reach a goal. Like the belts are all about goal setting, learning something, mastering it, right? And I guarantee that if your kid is 6 or 7 and he gets his black belt by 10, by the time he attacks middle school, he's going to have tools that other kids don't have because of the fact they did Taekwondo, right? So that's the first thing I would say. For anybody that wants to become an instructor, I think the biggest thing is that you have to take joy in making people happy, right? Make sure that, it's not just about the kicking and punching, right? Yeah, you could be the greatest martial artist in the world, but, if you, at the end of the day, the person you're working with feels more frustrated or feels they've been condescended to and they don't feel good about themselves, then it's not the right business. Your job is to bring smiles to people's faces. This is a quote from Dr. Thompson, who created verbal judo. And he said that, he said this for all the police officers. And I think it's a great quote for Taekwondo masters too, is that when you meet someone, make sure you find them in a better place than before they met you. And I think that's true. Like every time you meet someone, they should feel like, man, that was a great conversation. Oh, I'm so glad. I didn't want to come to class, but I feel so much better about myself. That's where you want to leave people when they leave dojan, right? And I think, that you should come with that in mind if you want to become an instructor.
Every day when I meet someone or I speak to someone, and today's going to be one of those days, as soon as I get off this podcast, I have a little journal that I keep of quotes and memorable things that I'd like to remind myself of, and I'm going to jot that one down. I have one from John Holloway, and he said, someone had told him when he went to meet them, he said, Taekwondo is for everyone, but not everyone is for Taekwondo. And it was, and what you just said is, it's in that realm of things to be said and to be remembered. And if we could all remember just to think about that in a certain way. I'll share a personal story about you and I. I had made a statement, and you became aware of it, and you reached out to me to talk to me about it, and had the courage to, as a friend of mine, to say, hey, what did you really mean to think about and say? Was that really what you wanted to say? And do you understand what you're saying? And it caused me to reflect upon it and retract that statement and grow as a person. And then we spent some time together. And one of the things that I've always liked about you is that willingness to help others change and to see themselves through a different lens and a mirror that we can't see in individuals. And I can hear it in the way that you approach Taekwondo, which brings me to my final kind of thought. And I know that you have another event coming up with your group of amazing individuals that you cooperate with and get together in the ASA event. Can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming event in Las Vegas?
Yes, sir. We're going to be at the Horseshoe Casino in Las Vegas, which is right across from Caesar's Palace. And we have some top instructors from Canada. Grandmaster Sungmin Rim is coming in, and he's going to talk about some Pumse and training methods for Pumse. And then I'm very happy to say you are coming, sir. I think this is the first time, right? And love to see you there. We have a Taekwondo person who has hit it big in the MMA world. We have Coach Eddie Cha, who trained the Korean Zombie, Henry Cejudo, some of the best MMA stars. And he has some Taekwondo footwork and some other footwork he came up with in his striking system. So just, what's our biggest failing in Taekwondo? Our hands, right? Taekwondo people don't have hands. Well, he's going to, show us some of his hand curriculum. I'm sick of doing horse riding stance, middle punch, right? So just doing a little bit more practical stuff there. And then, I know we have another person, Master Rick Shin, who started a combat Taekwondo league, doing something a little bit of counter different. So anything that promotes Taekwondo that might be a little different, he's also going to be there as well. And so, like I said, we have a Miss Shannon Park who has a degree in working with little kids and how to work with little children. Sometimes, we're getting all these itty bitties in our school, 4, 5, 6s, and maybe we're not communicating the best way with them. And so she's going to bring a different flair to that as well. So it's a very diverse group of teachers and masters and so forth. And like I said, I'm very blessed that that these people are still willing to talk to me when I call them, and that they're willing to share their knowledge and bring us all together. And also, that we feel inspired and that we can bring it back to our dojo, and that you have something usable stuff. Obviously, there's the usual stuff about business and so forth that people are going to talk about, new ways to get people through the internet, AI. There's some other things that are coming down the pipeline as well. So.
Well, I didn't mention it because I'm coming, but I have meant to come for a long time, and I'm honored to be invited. But I'm coming to learn, so I'm coming to spend time. I come from a school where we were known for punching, and back when punching wasn't performatory, it was practical, and we did it. And so our instructor, my instructor, may he rest peacefully, was one of the best punchers I had ever met. And we fought in a lot of those point tournaments as well. So I look forward to meeting Master Cha and working with him. And I've watched Miss Park's videos. She's an inspiring individual. So I look forward to learning and getting a chance to get my dobak a little wet. It's been a little while since I've trained hard enough to make it wet. I train every day, but my biggest competitor now is my 6-year-olds, and I'm up to fighting 6-year-olds again. But again, Master Lee, one of the things I've always loved and respected about you is your penchant for tradition and respect for your dad and respect for the community that created you and created all of us, and your continual willingness to help others live that lifestyle and live the life that we all have benefited from. And the words that you have said resonate with me. I look forward to seeing you shortly, but I want to thank you on behalf of Masters Alliance Uncut. I couldn't think of a better guest to have spent an afternoon with.
Well, thank you very much, sir. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you, sir. Well, that was inspiring. What an amazing man. What an amazing young man who is doing great things in his community, for his students, for 10,000 students in his community, and now for the martial arts industry in general. Too often we're met with people who don't serve as role models, but rather serve as just profiteers. This is an individual who does it for the right reasons, was taught the right reasons by his father, Grandmaster Lee. So on behalf of the Martial Arts Podcast Uncut, that was Master Lee, Chan Lee, and I am Herb Perez. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to check out our other podcast with our Olympic champions, coaches, and just people who inspire us to be better than we can be every day and in every way. Thank you for listening, and see you on the other side.